So here's a thought. Nurses, we love them. We trust them. They're the ones who save us when we're down bad. Like if you've ever had a nurse slide in and stick an Roman 4 in your arm while joking about the weather, you know what I mean. They're professional, caring, and they make the terrifying hospital stuff a little less awful. But what if the nurse, the one person trained to keep you alive, was secretly the danger? That's not just some scary story. That's exactly what happened in Miami, Florida, with a woman named Gina Emmanuel. She was 56 years old, a registered nurse. On paper, she looked rock solid, stable career, a safe bet, someone you'd leave your grandma with no questions asked, someone you'd clap for during Nurses Week. But what Gina really did behind closed doors is the kind of thing that makes you question how well you really know people. Back in 2017, Gina adopted three sisters. The girls were just kids, 12, 7, and 6, and everyone thought this was going to be one of those uplifting stories. A nurse respected in the community, giving three girls from a rough background a new chance at life. Seriously, it's the kind of thing that makes headlines. Local nurse adopts three orphans, community inspired. You know the drill. Everyone's nodding along, saying, "See, there are good people in the world." But in reality, it was nothing like that. Because what Gina gave those girls wasn't love, it wasn't safety, it wasn't family, it was torment. Behind the doors of that Miami home, the three sisters lived in fear. Food wasn't guaranteed. Meals were rationed, sometimes withheld entirely. Instead of bathrooms, they were forced to use buckets. Instead of normal childhood punishments, they were locked in rooms, chained, or forced to stand still for hours until their legs shook. And this wasn't random discipline gone wrong. This was a system, a cycle, a daily routine of cruelty. And here's where it stings even more. Gina wasn't clueless. She wasn't some uneducated, overwhelmed parent who didn't know what to do. She was a nurse. She understood health. She understood development. She knew exactly how dangerous neglect and starvation were, and she did it anyway. From healer to tormentor, from caregiver to captor. And then came late 2018. The 7-year-old Samaya got sick, pneumonia. And here's the thing, pneumonia is serious, but it's also treatable. With medical care, antibiotics, fluids, a kid can bounce back. And remember, her adoptive mother was literally a nurse. She had the training. She had the knowledge. She should have known the signs. But Gina didn't take Samaya to the doctor. She didn't bring her to the hospital. She didn't give her medicine. She just let the sickness run its course, and Samaya died. 7 years old, dead from untreated pneumonia and sepsis. And that's the kind of irony you can't make up. The woman who was trained to save lives let a child die because she chose to do nothing. Samaya's death forced authorities to take a closer look. By 2019, detectives were inside that house, and what they found was horrifying. The surviving sisters had visible injuries, burns, scars, signs of malnutrition. They told stories of chains, of locks, of starvation. And police found the evidence. The chains, the locks, the marks on their bodies that lined up with their stories. The picture was undeniable. This wasn't a strict parent. This wasn't even just a bad parent. This was a house of horrors. But the most powerful moment came from the oldest sister. She had been 12 during the worst of it, and she took the stand in court. Imagine that. You're a kid. You've lived through abuse most adults couldn't even process. And now you're standing in a courtroom telling strangers what happened. And not just strangers, the very woman who caused it all is sitting right there, staring at you. She told the jury everything. The starvation, the punishments, the neglect. And that testimony, it hit like a hammer. Because it wasn't just evidence. It was raw truth. On April 14th, 2025, the jury came back with a verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder for the death of Samaya. Aggravated child abuse for the surviving sisters. And here's the kicker. The jury only deliberated for about an hour. Think about that. Murder trials usually take days of arguments, debates, back and forth. Not this one. This one was open and shut. When a jury needs only an hour, that's not a debate. That's everyone saying, yeah, we're done here. 2 weeks later, on April 30th, sentencing came down. Gina Emmanuel, once a respected nurse, was handed life in prison plus 30 years. No parole, no release. She is going to die behind bars. But the line that stole the moment didn't come from the judge. It came from one of the survivors. Ayana, now 18, looked Gina straight in the eye and said, "I wish you well in hell." 6 words. That's all it took to end the story. So let's really step back for a second. Why does this case cut so deep? Why does it stick with people even after the headlines fade? Because it's not just about the abuse, and it's not just about the murder of a little girl. It's about betrayal, the ugliest kind of betrayal. Think about it. Gina Emmanuel wasn't supposed to be the threat. She wasn't some shady stranger lurking in an alley. She wasn't a hardened criminal straight out of a mugshot lineup. She was a nurse, a woman in scrubs, someone the world is conditioned to trust without question. When you see a nurse, you don't think danger. You think safety. You think care. You think, I can let my guard down here. And that's exactly why this case is so chilling. Because she used that trust like a weapon. She hid behind it. She built this image of responsibility and compassion, while behind closed doors she was systematically breaking children down piece by piece. She wasn't healing. She was harming. She wasn't building lives. She was destroying them. And let's not forget, these were children who already came from trauma, foster care, the instability of bouncing from one house to another. They were finally supposed to have a forever home. They were supposed to finally exhale and feel safe, and instead they walked straight into their worst nightmare. That betrayal doesn't just vanish when the court slams down a guilty verdict. The surviving sisters don't just carry scars on their skin. They carry scars in their memories. They carry scars in how they look at the world. Trust becomes harder. Relationships become harder. And the cruelest part, it's not just what was done to them, it's who did it to them. Because therapy can help, time can help, but nothing erases the fact that the very person who was supposed to protect them was the one who hurt them the most. That betrayal becomes part of the story they carry for life. And that's why people couldn't stop talking about this case in Miami. It wasn't just shock at the abuse. It was the realization that someone in scrubs, someone who might have smiled at you in a clinic, someone you'd never hesitate to trust, could be capable of this. Prosecutors called it calculated cruelty. And you know what? They were right, because this wasn't some heat of the moment mistake. It wasn't a bad day that spiraled out of control. It wasn't a single lapse in judgment. It was a system, a pattern, a choice repeated over and over. Every time Gina starved those girls, she chose cruelty. Every time she locked the door, every time she ignored a cough or a fever, every time she withheld comfort or care, she was choosing it. Deliberately, consciously, repeatedly. And the community called it unthinkable. Which is also true, because most of us can't even wrap our heads around that kind of deliberate cruelty. It's not just a crime, it's a total inversion of everything we're taught to believe about caretakers. That's why the irony cuts so deep, because monsters don't always come with flashing warning signs. They don't always look like villains out of a movie. Sometimes they smile politely. Sometimes they're the ones society celebrates. Sometimes they're standing right in front of you in a pair of medical scrubs, projecting safety while hiding something sinister. And that's the lasting chill of this story. Gina Emmanuel went from nurse to nightmare, from supposed healer to convicted murderer. Justice finally caught her. She'll never walk free again. But the damage she caused, that's not something a sentence can fix. That's not something a prison cell erases. Because scars on the body can fade. Scars on the mind, those last forever. And maybe that's the part that lingers the most. The part that makes this story stick with you long after the video ends. That sometimes the scariest mask a monster can wear is the mask of a healer.